I got a call from my son. Your beach house and car are sold. We're leaving tomorrow. But I calmly replied, I understand, but you forgot something. He asked, what do you mean? I laughed out loud, because the house she sold was actually. You know, there are moments in life when you realize the person you thought you knew best is a stranger. For me, that moment arrived with a gut-wrenching realization. My own son, Lionel, wasn't just trying to control my life, he was actively trying to steal it from right under my nose. But what he didn't know was that I'd already made my move, and his carefully laid plans were about to crash down around him. It all started on a gloomy Monday. I was out on my porch, nursing a cold coffee, watching the wind whip leaves across the yard of the house Owen and I had built our lives in for 37 years. It felt so big and empty now, just for me. Then the phone rang. It was Lionel. My son rarely called just to chat, it was usually with some grand purpose, another rational suggestion for improving my life. I tried to sound upbeat, energetic. The last thing I needed was his comments about me sounding depressed or weak. Mom, are you up yet? His impatience was already bleeding through the phone. I want to stop by your place this afternoon. There are some things we need to discuss. What matters, dear? I asked, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. I already knew this wouldn't be pleasant. Just financial matters, he said, but his tone screamed the opposite. I'll be at your place around 2. Then, just like that, he hung up. I sighed, taking another sip of my now icy coffee. At 67, I felt perfectly healthy and sane. But Lionel, who'd just turned 42, seemed to think otherwise. Ever since Owen passed 5 years ago, my son had started treating me differently. At first, it was subtle. He'd speak louder, slower, as if I'd suddenly gone deaf or forgotten how to understand English. Then he'd start explaining the simplest things to me, how to use an ATM, how to fill out a check, how to set an alarm clock. Things I'd been perfectly capable of doing for the last 50 years. I got up, heading inside. I had to clean up before his visit. Sometimes I felt like I had to look immaculate, just so he wouldn't find another reason to worry about my condition. My house, a beautiful 2-story home with a spacious garden I lovingly tended, had always been my pride and joy. Owen and I bought it when Iris and Lionel were just little kids, 5 and 7. These walls held so many memories. But with each year after Owen left, the house felt emptier, quieter. As I made my bed, my gaze fell on our wedding anniversary picture. Owen, looking up at me with that same tenderness from the day we first met. Rose, you are the strongest woman I know, he used to say. I wondered what he'd say now, seeing how his son was treating me. Exactly at 2, the doorbell rang. Lionel was nothing if not punctual. I opened it to find him standing there with Veronica, my sister-in-law. They were an odd pair, him, tall and thin with a perpetually preoccupied frown, her, petite and blonde with a sharp gaze and thin lips that rarely offered a genuine smile. Mom, Lionel hugged me, but pulled away quickly, his eyes appraising me. You look good. Veronica baked you a blueberry pie. Veronica handed me a perfectly pristine pie. No sugar, she said, as if she were doing me a huge favor. We're watching your health. I thanked them, inviting them into the living room. Veronica settled cups from my cupboard, while Lionel paced, scrutinizing every corner. Mom, how long ago did you call the plumber? There's a stain on your ceiling in the hallway. Looks like a leak. There's no leak, Lionel, I tried to keep my voice calm. It's the shadow from the tree outside the window. It's always been there. Are you sure? He frowned. I can get my man to check it out. You know, little problems can turn into big expenses if they're not fixed in time. I just nodded, knowing it was useless to argue. Lionel was always finding something that needed fixing in my house. Over the past year, he'd already called an electrician, a carpenter, and a gardener, all of whom had assured me there was absolutely nothing wrong. When we finally sat down, Lionel pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Mom, I want to talk about your finances. He started in that condescending tone he used with his 10-year-old daughter. I checked your bank statements for the last 3 months, and I'm concerned about some of the transactions. My body tensed. I had never given him access to my bank accounts. How did you get my statements, Lionel? He faltered for a moment. That's not important. What's important is that you spend too much on things you don't need. Like, why did you send $500 to that online store last month? It was a gift for Faye, I replied, feeling anger simmer beneath the surface. A bicycle for my granddaughter's birthday. Mom, $500 is too much for a baby gift. Besides, Faye already has a bicycle. It's a gift for my granddaughter, from Iris, Lionel. And no, she didn't have a bike. The one you and Veronica gave her last Christmas was a tricycle. She's 6 now. She's outgrown it. Lionel exchanged glances with Veronica, and I knew what they were thinking, poor old Rose. She's confused about the facts, anyway, Lionel continued, completely ignoring my remark. I think you need help managing your finances. Since Dad died, your spending has become less predictable. What do you mean? I tried to keep my voice steady. Well, like that cruise you booked last year, $700 for a week on a ship. That's just reckless. Lionel, I took a deep breath. That cruise was a gift from me to Iris and her family. We had a wonderful time. Besides, I spent my money that I made with your father. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Mother. Lionel lowered his voice, as if explaining something vital to a toddler. You can't just throw money around. Who knows how many years you have left to live? You've got to think about the future. What future, Lionel? I asked, each word stabbing into me like a needle. The one where I sit in my house afraid to spend a dime without your permission? Veronica coughed quietly. Rose, dear, we're just worried about you, she said, her concern sounding utterly fake. Lionel and I often talk about how hard it must be for you to be alone in this big house. Maybe you should think of something more appropriate for your age. I stared at them both, the pieces finally clicking into place. Their true intentions laid bare. They wanted me to sell the house. My house. The house that was probably the most valuable asset in my portfolio, as Lionel liked to call it. I'm doing just fine in this house, I said firmly. And I don't plan to sell it. No one's talking about selling right now, Lionel said quickly, though his eyes screamed otherwise. But you should start thinking about it. The real estate market is booming right now. What about the beach house? Veronica intervened. Have you been there once in the last 2 years? The beach house on the coast, Owen and I's sanctuary. We bought it the year before he died, planning to spend our retirement there. But fate had other plans. I rarely went there after he left. Too many memories. No, but that doesn't mean I want to sell it, I replied, though a part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. Lately, I had been thinking more and more about getting rid of the cabin. But not because Lionel thought it was a rational decision. Mom, the cabin is just sitting idle, losing value. You pay taxes, insurance, utilities. It's all money down the drain. I'll think about it, I said, knowing it was the only way to close the subject. Lionel nodded, seemingly satisfied that his words were having an effect, at least outwardly. There's something else. He pulled another document from the folder. I spoke to our family lawyer, Mr. Burton. He thinks you should get a power of attorney in case if you need help making important decisions. I felt the blood drain from my face. Power of attorney for you, I assume. It's just a precaution, Mother. Lionel tried to smile, but it was unconvincing. You're not getting any younger, and sometimes there are situations where you have to act quickly, like selling a house or a beach house. I couldn't hide my sarcasm. Not necessarily, Veronica interjected. But you have to admit, Rose, it would be easier if Lionel could help you with paperwork and banking and such. I looked at my son and daughter-in-law, trying to pinpoint when it all went wrong. When did my smart, caring boy turn into this controlling man who only sees his mother as a burden and potential inheritance? After Owen died, I felt so lost. We had been together for 43 years, and suddenly he was gone. A heart attack took him so quickly that I didn't even have time to say goodbye. In those first months of mourning, Lionel was truly a support. He helped with funeral arrangements, with paperwork, with sorting through Owen's things. I was grateful to him. But then something changed. He began to take an increasing interest in my finances. At first, it was innocent questions. Was I doing well on my bills? Did I need help with my tax returns? Then came the advice, where to invest money, what expenses to cut. And now, bank statements and power of attorney. I don't think I need a power of attorney, Lionel, I said firmly. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Mom, it's just insurance, he insisted. No one's saying you can't make decisions, but what if you get sick? What if something happens to you? Then I'll contact you, I replied. Or Iris. Lionel's face tensed slightly at the mention of my daughter. He'd never hidden his opinion of Iris's life choices, as he'd called them. Choices that had led her to a humble life as a gardener in a botanical garden instead of the corporate career he thought was the only worthy one. Iris, he snorted. Mom, she's barely managing her own finances. How can she help you? Iris is doing fine with her life, I felt a wave of anger rising. She's happy. Can you say the same? Lionel looked as if I had slapped him. Veronica put a hand on his shoulder. We're not here to discuss Iris, she said coldly. We're talking about your well-being, Rose. No, I stood up from the table. You're talking about my money. And I think we should end this conversation. Lionel stood up too, his face flushed with restrained anger. Mom, you're being irrational. I'm trying to help you. I didn't ask for help, Lionel, I said quietly. And I certainly didn't give you permission to check my bank statements. How did you get access to them in the first place? He faltered for a moment, then mumbled something about Mr. Burton helping him. Mr. Burton had no right to give you information about my accounts without my consent. I felt my resolve growing. I'll call him tomorrow. There's no need to bother him, Lionel said quickly. I was just trying to make sure you were okay. You so rarely share the details of your life with me. Because it's my life, Lionel, I met his gaze. And I'm going to live it as I see fit. The rest of their visit passed in a tense, stifling atmosphere. Veronica pretended to enjoy her tea, and Lionel flipped through some magazine, clearly seething. Half an hour later, they left, leaving an untouched blueberry pie and a promise to continue this conversation later. When the door closed behind them, I leaned my back against it and took a deep breath. My heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I wasn't used to confronting Lionel. Usually, I just nodded and agreed to avoid conflict. But something was different today. Maybe it was the attempt at a proxy, or his condescending comments about Iris, or just the cumulative effect of years of putting up with his controlling behavior. I walked to the living room and picked up a picture from the mantelpiece. It showed Owen and me on the day we bought our house. We looked so young, so full of hope. What would you do, Owen? I whispered, running my finger over his smiling face. I already knew the answer. Owen had always encouraged me to be strong and independent. You're not just my wife, Rose, he often said. You're a separate person with your own dreams and desires. Don't ever let anyone, not even me, tell you how to live your life. The next morning, I woke with an unexpected sense of lightness. The previous day, despite the unpleasant conversation with Lionel, had awakened a long-forgotten resolve in me. Over my morning coffee, I was looking through my day planner when I noticed an entry for an upcoming visit to Iris. My mood instantly improved. My daughter, Iris, was the complete opposite of her brother. Where Lionel was calculating and ambitious, she was spontaneous and enthusiastic. Where he sought material success, she sought harmony and joy in simple things. While I loved both my children, in recent years, it was my interactions with my daughter that were the source of real warmth for me. I packed quickly, deciding to go to her earlier than planned. Visiting Iris always lifted my spirits. And today, I really needed that boost of positive energy. The spring botanical garden where my daughter worked was only a 20-minute drive from my house. As I parked and entered, I was greeted by the familiar scent of flowering plants and moist earth. I knew I'd find Iris in the rose garden. It was her favorite part, and one she tended with special affection. And indeed, there she was, bent over a rose bush, carefully trimming wilted buds. In her wide-brimmed straw hat, gardening gloves, and simple linen dress, Iris looked so natural and peaceful that my heart filled with pride. Her blonde hair, gathered into a simple ponytail, glowed golden in the morning sunlight. "Mom," she exclaimed when she saw me. "You're early today." She took off her gloves, rose from her knees, and hugged me. She smelled of earth, roses, and that fresh scent I always associated with youth. "I thought I'd catch you at work," I smiled. "Do you mind?" "Of course not. I'm just finishing up this section." "Wait a minute, and we can go for tea." I sat down on the nearest bench and watched how deftly and confidently Iris handled her tools. Her movements were full of love and years of experience. It was hard to believe Lionel had once scoffed at her decision to become a gardener. Asterisk, how can you spend 4 years in college only to end up digging in the dirt? Asterisk, I remembered him saying that after Iris announced her profession. I couldn't find anything to say back then. I just pressed my lips together. Now, looking at my daughter, I could see how right she was to follow her vocation. A few minutes later, Iris finished her work, put her tools away, and taking off her hat, came to me. "Come on, Mom. We have fresh blueberry pastries in the cafeteria today." We walked through the garden to the small cafeteria. Iris was truly her own person here. The staff greeted her by name, and visitors often stopped to ask her questions about this or that plant. As we settled at a table in the corner with cups of herbal tea and blueberry muffins, Iris looked at me carefully. "Is something wrong, Mom? You look like you've decided something for yourself." I'd always marveled at her ability to read my emotions. While Lionel seemed to see only what he wanted to see, Iris always noticed what was lurking beneath the surface. "Lionel came by yesterday," I sighed. "With Veronica." "Oh." Iris frowned slightly. "What did they want this time?" I told her about the conversation, about Lionel's attempt to get power of attorney, about his persistent offers to sell the house and the beach house. Iris's face grew more and more serious with each word. "This is out of line, Mom," she said when I finished. "He has no right to interfere in your life like this." "I know. And yesterday was the first time I really let him know it." Iris raised her eyebrows in surprise. "You did? What did you say?" "That it's my life, and I'll live it as I see fit." I felt a surge of pride remembering my firmness. Iris reached out and squeezed my palm. "I'm proud of you, Mother. I know how hard it is for you to stand up to Lionel. He's always had a way of pushing people around." We finished our tea, and Iris suggested we walk to the greenhouse where she wanted to show me her new orchid collection. On the way, we discussed the minutiae of everyday life, her work, my classes, the latest news. "How are Brad and Faye?" I asked as we entered the warm, humid atmosphere of the greenhouse. Iris's face brightened at the mention of her husband and daughter. "Great. Brad is working on a big project right now, the electrification of a new industrial complex on the outskirts of town. He's in charge of the whole electrical system there, you know. He got all these special permits last year, and now he's literally the most sought-after specialist in the market. The factories, the new buildings, everyone wants him, she said with genuine pride in her voice. And Faye, she won the school science competition last week. Just like me, she loves plants. I smiled, picturing my granddaughter concentrating on studying leaves or flowers for a school project. I need to come visit you all, I said. I haven't seen Faye and Brad in a while. Actually, Iris stopped in front of a display case of purple orchids, but she wasn't looking at the flowers. She was looking at me. I wanted to invite you over for dinner tonight. We have some news we'd like to share with you. There was an excitement in her voice that intrigued me. Of course, I'd love to come. Something good, I hope? Very. Iris smiled mysteriously. But the rest is for dinner. Be there at 6. Brad will be making his signature lasagna. After the greenhouse, Iris showed me the new Japanese rock garden she'd been working on for the past few months. We spent another hour walking around the botanical garden grounds before I headed home to get ready for my evening visit. At 6 p.m. sharp, I parked in front of the modern Brooklyn Heights apartment complex. It was an impressive structure, several tall towers of glass and concrete surrounded by carefully planned green space. Iris and her family had recently taken out a mortgage on an apartment here, and I hadn't quite gotten used to the idea that my daughter, who had chosen such an unprofitable profession as a gardener, was living in one of the city's most prestigious neighborhoods. Faye met me at the front door. My granddaughter literally flew out as soon as she saw my car. Grandma! She rushed to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. Come quickly! Daddy is making lasagna, and I helped with the salad. I hugged my granddaughter, marveling at how fast she was growing up. At 6, Faye was a carbon copy of Iris at the same age, the same lively brown eyes, the same blonde hair, the same vibrant energy. We took the elevator to the 10th floor, and Faye led me down the hall to apartment 104. As soon as the door opened, the scent of Italian spices and freshly baked bread enveloped me. Brad came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, tall, broad-shouldered with close-cropped blonde hair and kind eyes. He always reminded me of Owen's younger brother. Rose, he hugged me. It's good to see you. How was your trip? Fine, thank you, Brad. It smells delicious. I hope it tastes good. He grinned. Faye, show Grandma your new drawings while I finish dinner. Faye pulled me into the living room where a gallery of children's drawings was spread out on the coffee table. While my granddaughter enthusiastically explained each sheet, I looked around the apartment. It was a spacious, bright two-bedroom apartment with panoramic windows overlooking the city park, modern furniture, minimalist design, but with lots of personal touches, family photos, books, small souvenirs from travels, children's crafts, live plants in every corner. There was an atmosphere of love and comfort that was sorely lacking in Lionel and Veronica's perfectly furnished but cold home. Iris soon joined us, having changed into a simple house dress after work. Faye, go wash your hands before dinner, she said to her daughter, then turned to me. Thanks for coming, Mom. Brad and I can't wait to tell you our news. Over dinner, which was really great, Brad's lasagna deserved all the credit, the conversation was casual. Faye talked about school. Brad joked about his fellow electricians. Iris shared stories about visitors to the botanical garden. I watched them, feeling deeply grateful to have this part of the family in my life. Sincere. Loving. Real. After dinner, Faye begged her father to play a board game with her, and they settled into a corner of the living room, leaving Iris and me to clear the table. So, I said, helping my daughter put the dishes in the dishwasher. What's your news? Iris glowed with happiness. Remember I told you that we have a great apartment in our complex? It's on the 9th floor, right below us. A bedroom and a studio kitchen, with a terrace and a view of the park. She was silent for a moment, then added with obvious excitement. Brad and I were thinking, maybe you'd like to move there, to be closer to us, to Faye? I looked at her in surprise. Move here? Yes. Iris took my hands. Mom, it's a brand new complex with everything you need: stores, cafes, a fitness center, even a small clinic and pharmacy, and a park right outside the window. And we'll be right next door, just one floor up. I was so surprised by the offer that I didn't answer right away. But Iris, it's very expensive, and I have a house that's too big for you alone, she said softly. And one that requires constant upkeep. Think how nice it would be to have no worries about a leaky roof or clogged pipes. Everything new, modern, comfortable. Brad, noticing our serious conversation, left Faye with the game and came over to us. Had Iris told you about our idea yet? He asked with a smile. Rose, this really is a great place. I've seen this apartment. It's not as big as ours, but it's very cozy and thoughtful. A real gem. But how can I afford an apartment like that? I asked. Even if I sell the house and the beach house together are worth a lot more than this apartment. Brad explained, you could buy it without a mortgage and still have money left over. I thought about it. I'd resisted the idea of selling the house before, especially when Lionel had suggested it. But now, when the offer was coming from Iris and Brad, and it wasn't just selling, but starting a new chapter with a part of the family that really appreciated me, it sounded tempting. Let me show you. Iris pulled a glossy booklet from a cabinet drawer and spread it out in front of me. The pages showed modern, bright apartments with panoramic windows, stylish furniture, and beautiful views. Then she showed me a plan of the apartment complex with a park, a pond, bike paths, cafes, stores, and all sorts of amenities. And here is our apartment, she pointed to a floor plan. And here's the one on the 9th floor we're talking about. I studied the booklet, and with each page, the idea seemed more and more attractive. Living in a modern apartment without the worries of maintaining a big, old house. Being close to Iris, Brad, and Faye. Having access to all the complex's infrastructure. And, importantly, disposing of my property as I chose, not at Lionel's behest. That's very tempting, I admitted, but I need time to think about it. It's a big decision. Of course, Mother. Iris hugged me. We just wanted you to know about the possibility. Brad and I have been thinking about it ever since we saw the ad for that apartment. Imagine how great it would be. Faye could come over after school. We could have dinner together, go to the park. And no Lionel telling you what to do and how to do it, Brad added with a slight chuckle. Faye wrinkled her nose when she heard her uncle's name. Uncle Lionel is always so serious, she said with her usual childlike candor. And Aunt Veronica never really smiles. Faye! Iris tried to make a stern face, but I could see she was laughing. Don't talk about relatives like that. But it's true. Faye insisted. Grandma, if you live near us, we can see each other every day. Looking at my granddaughter's enthusiastic face, I felt something warm blossom in my chest. Maybe this really is what I need. A new beginning next to people who truly love me, not for what I can give them, but just for what I am. I'll seriously consider your offer, I said. And it was true. And I'll call a realtor tomorrow to see what my house and beach house might be worth. Iris glowed, and Brad nodded approvingly. The rest of the evening passed in a warm family atmosphere. Faye and I played a game of chess. I gave in, letting her win. Brad showed pictures of his new project, and Iris shared her plans for a small garden on their patio. When it was time to leave, I had a lightness and peace of mind like I hadn't had in a long time. On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about Iris's proposal. The Brooklyn Heights apartment complex really looked impressive. Modern, comfortable, and well-developed infrastructure. To live close to my daughter and granddaughter, to see them every day, to be a part of their lives. This thought filled me with joy. And yet, the decision to sell the house where I spent most of my life with Owen was not an easy one. So many memories, so many stories were held within those walls. But maybe it was time to move on, to start a new chapter, leaving the past behind, keeping only the memories in my heart. The next morning, I called Hugo Prescott, the realtor Owen and I had worked with when we bought the beach house. Hugo had always been known for his attention to detail and honesty, qualities I valued in people, especially those who dealt with finances. "Rose, what a nice surprise." His voice sounded warm and sincere. "What can I do for you?" "Hugo, I'm thinking of selling the beach house, and maybe the main house, too," I said, surprised at my own determination. "Could we meet to discuss the details?" "Sure," he agreed immediately. "I can stop by this afternoon if it's convenient for you." We arranged to meet at 2, and I spent the morning getting the paperwork together for both houses and the car. The thought of saying goodbye to the place where I'd lived most of my life brought mixed feelings. But every time the doubts started to overwhelm me, I remembered Faye's face as she talked about how great it would be to see each other every day, and my resolve returned. At exactly 2, Hugo's car pulled up. Accuracy had always been one of his strong points. I made tea and cookies, and we settled into the living room. "So, Rose, tell me more about your plans." Hugo pulled out a notebook and pen, ready to take notes. I told him about Iris's offer to move to Brooklyn Heights, the 9th-floor apartment, and my desire to start a new chapter in my life. "Brooklyn Heights is an excellent choice," Hugo nodded approvingly. "It's one of the most prestigious new developments in the city. The quality of construction is top-notch, and the infrastructure is excellent. What do you think of my idea to sell both houses and my car?" I asked. "Would I get enough to buy an apartment there?" Hugo tapped his pen thoughtfully on his notebook. "Let's do the math. The real estate market is booming, especially for a property like your beach house. Close to the water, good condition, it's very valuable. Your main house is in a great neighborhood, too. And despite its age, it's well maintained. As for the car, how old is it?" 5, I answered. "But the mileage is low, and I rarely drove long distances." Hugo made a few notes, then looked up and smiled. "Rose, I'm pretty sure the proceeds from the sale will more than cover the cost of the Brooklyn Heights apartment. Even with all the taxes and fees, you'll have a decent amount of money left over." Something inside me relaxed. It was one thing to dream about moving, but it was another to know that it was financially possible. "Okay," I nodded. "Where do we start?" "I suggest we start with the beach house," Hugo said. "It would be easier to sell, and it would give us an idea of how the main house would go. Can I go and see it in the next few days?" Sure. I haven't been there in a while." I felt a pang of guilt. Owen had loved the cabin so much, and I'd almost abandoned it after he died. Maybe it could use a little work. "Don't worry about it," Hugo assured me. "I know some great contractors who can fix it up in no time." As for the car, he could recommend a reliable used car dealer. We agreed we'd go to see the beach house the next day, and Hugo left, leaving me feeling like I had just taken the first step toward a new life. The beach house tour went better than I expected. Even though I hadn't visited in over a year, the local support staff that Owen and I hired back when we bought it did a good job. The cottage was clean, well-maintained, and only minimal cosmetic repairs were needed. Hugo took a few photos, measured the rooms, and wrote up a detailed description. "Rose, I think we can put it on the market next week," he said as we drove back into town. "With any luck, we'll find a buyer pretty quickly. Properties like this are going fast right now." And so it was. Within 10 days of the house appearing on real estate websites, we had 3 potential buyers. The young couple who eventually made the best offer fell in love with the house at first sight. "It's exactly what we were looking for," said the woman, Elizabeth, looking out over the ocean view terrace. "A place to escape from the hustle and bustle of the city." As I watched her and her husband Nathan make plans for the cabin, I felt a strange sense of relief. This cabin deserved to have laughter again, to be filled with life and love. Owen would be pleased. The beach house deal went smoothly and quickly. Elizabeth and Nathan paid even more than we had originally asked for, so much did they like the place. My car also sold for a good price. As Hugo had predicted, the low mileage and excellent condition made a difference. The main house was a little more complicated. Despite its prestigious neighborhood and spaciousness, its age and style limited the range of potential buyers. Hugo suggested doing some renovations and freshening up the interior before putting it on the market. Modern buyers like bright, open spaces, he explained as we discussed the plan of action. A few halogen lights, fresh, light-colored paint, maybe some wallpaper, and the house would look completely different. I agreed. Although the thought of changing anything in a house that had remained unchanged for so many years made me uneasy, Hugo was right. After 2 weeks of work by the renovation team, the house looked fresher and more modern while retaining its character and charm. All this time, I hadn't told Lionel about my plans. Part of me wanted to call him, to explain what I was doing and why. But the other part, the part that was still hurt by his attempts to control my life, preferred to keep it a secret until the last moment. After all, I didn't have to answer to him about my decisions. Iris, on the other hand, was in the loop every step of the way. She helped me sort through my belongings, deciding what to take with me to my new apartment and what to give away, sell, or throw away. It was a strangely liberating process to sift through decades of accumulated items, leaving only the ones that really mattered. "Are you sure you want to get rid of this stuff?" Iris asked every time I put aside something she thought might have sentimental value to me. "I take my memories with me, dear," I answered. "And things are just things." There were exceptions, of course: photographs, Owen's letters, a few special pieces of furniture that could be placed in the new apartment. But most of what filled my and Owen's home was stuff I was ready to leave behind. Finally, almost 2 months after my first conversation with Hugo, there was a buyer for the main house, a married couple with 2 teenage children who were looking for a spacious home in a good neighborhood. They made an offer slightly below the asking price, but after a little negotiation, we came to an agreement that suited both parties. "Congratulations, Rose," Hugo said as we signed the final papers. "You've just successfully sold all your real estate, and I must say, at a very good price." I felt a strange mixture of emotions: relief, excitement, a slight sadness, and above all, a sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I was completely free from the obligations and responsibilities of home ownership. It was frightening and exciting at the same time. The next day, Hugo and I went to the Brooklyn Heights sales office to discuss the purchase of the condo Iris had suggested. Iris herself joined us, taking a day off from the botanical gardens. "Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Prescott, we are pleased to welcome you," the sales manager, an elegant woman named Vivian, greeted us in a spacious office with panoramic windows overlooking the complex. "I understand you're interested in apartment 92. "Yes," Iris confirmed. "My mother is considering moving to Brooklyn Heights, and this apartment is perfect. It's 1 floor below ours." Vivian smiled. "That's a great choice. This apartment is one of our gems, compact, but very functional with a beautiful view of the park. Would you like to see it now?" We walked through the manicured grounds of the complex to the building where the apartment was located. Along the way, Vivian talked about the various amenities: pool, fitness center, 24-hour security, underground parking. "Brooklyn Heights is designed to maximize residents' comfort and safety," she explained. "All the services we need are available within the complex, yet we are only minutes away from downtown." We took the elevator to the 9th floor, and Vivian opened the door to apartment 92. I held my breath as I crossed the threshold. The first thing I noticed was the light. Large, floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with natural light. The apartment was smaller than my old house, but planned so intelligently that it felt spacious and airy. "The main space here is the studio kitchen," Vivian led us into the main room. A fully equipped kitchen with modern appliances, a bar counter that can serve as a dining table and a workplace. The living area was designed so that one could enjoy the view from the window. And indeed, we had a beautiful view of the park, green trees, winding paths, a small pond with a fountain. It was like a little oasis of nature in the middle of the city. And here's the bedroom. Vivian opened the door to the next room. It's not the biggest, but it's very cozy. The built-in closet saves space, and the window faces the same side as the living room, so the view of the park is preserved. The bedroom was really compact, but thoughtful. There was enough room for a bed, a small dresser, and even a window seat. I imagined waking up here in the morning, watching the sun rise over the park, and it filled me with peace. The bathroom. Vivian continued showing me the next room. Shower cubicle, toilet, wash basin, space for a washing machine, all the essentials. The bathroom was decorated with light-colored tiles, which visually enlarged the space. Modern plumbing, a large mirror, several built-in storage cabinets. Everything was thought out to the last detail. And finally, the gem of this apartment, the terrace. Vivian slid open the glass doors in the living room, and we stepped out onto the small but very pleasant terrace. There's enough room for a table and a couple of chairs. You could have a mini potted garden or just enjoy the fresh air and the view. I walked over to the railing and took a deep breath. From here, the park seemed even closer, and the noise of the city seemed farther away. It was the perfect place for morning coffee or afternoon tea. So, what do you think, Mom? Iris walked over to me, her eyes shining with excitement. Do you like it? It's perfect, I said. And it was true. The apartment was the epitome of everything I was looking for. Compact, but not cramped. Modern, but cozy. With a view that soothed my soul. We returned to the sales office to discuss the financial details. Hugo, as always, was invaluable. He helped me work out the ins and outs of the deal, making sure I got the best terms possible. Given that you are willing to pay full price outright with no mortgage, we can offer you a small discount, Vivian said as she looked through the documents. Also, if you decide to buy the furniture package, we'll include it at cost price. I glanced at Hugo, and he nodded faintly, confirming that it was a good offer. When can I move in? I asked, feeling my impatience growing. The apartment is completely ready, Vivian answered. As soon as we complete the formalities, which will take about a week, you can move in. Walking out of the sales office, I felt like I had just taken the most important step of my life after deciding to marry Owen. It was scary and exciting at the same time. You won't regret it, Mom. Iris hugged me. We'll be so close. Faye will be able to come over after school. We'll have dinner together, go to the park. I know, honey. I hugged her back. And I'm not sorry anymore. On the way home to the house that would soon no longer be mine, I thought about how my life had turned out. Just 2 months ago, I'd been overwhelmed by Lionel's attempts to control me, feeling old and helpless. And now I had sold 2 houses and a car, bought a new apartment, and was getting ready to start a whole new chapter of my life. The money from the sale really exceeded my expectations. After buying the apartment and setting aside the amount for a new, smaller car, I had a substantial amount left over, and I already had plans for that money. I decided to pay off most of Iris and Brad's mortgage. They deserved it. Not only for their kindness and caring, but for pushing me to take this drastic step. But I hadn't said anything to Lionel, not out of vindictiveness or a desire to punish him, but simply because it was my decision, my life, and I didn't feel the need to answer to him. That evening, sitting in my nearly empty living room, most of the furniture had already been sold or given away, I felt a strange lightness. It was as if by getting rid of things, I was also getting rid of the weight of the past, of expectations and conventions. In the silence of the empty house, I could finally be honest with myself. I was ready for a change, ready to put the past behind me and step into the future, a future of my own choosing. Lionel's call came early in the morning, just as I finished breakfast. For the past few weeks, I had been completely immersed in the process of preparing for the move. Most of my belongings had already been boxed up, some pieces of furniture sold, and the rest marked with stickers indicating where they would go, to my new apartment, to Iris's, to the thrift store, or to the dump. Seeing my son's name on the phone screen made me feel slightly uneasy. We hadn't spoken since the day he tried to convince me to sign the power of attorney. He'd called a couple times, but I hadn't answered, not feeling ready for another conversation about my financial security. "Good morning, Lionel," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Mom," he sounded unusually excited. "I finally got through to you. I have great news." "What news?" I asked, feeling my muscles tense. "I sold your beach house and car." His tone was so smug that I could almost see him leaning back in his chair, smiling in satisfaction. "Got a very good price for both. Given the state of the market, it was the perfect time to sell." I was silent, trying to comprehend what I was hearing. Lionel had sold my property I no longer owned, which I sold myself 2 months ago. "Are you there, Mom?" he asked when the pause lengthened. "Yes, Lionel, I'm here," I answered slowly. "And I'm trying to figure out how you managed to sell something that doesn't belong to you." "What?" There was confusion in his voice. "What are you talking about?" "We talked about this. Remember when I said the beach house was just losing value and your car was too big for a single woman your age? We discussed it, but I didn't give you permission to sell it," I said, feeling a strange calm grow inside me. "And more importantly, I sold both the house and the car 2 months ago." There was a long pause. I could almost hear the gears in my son's head turning, trying to make sense of this information. "What?" he finally squeezed out. "Is this some kind of joke? You didn't have a... How did you even..." "I worked with Hugo Prescott," I explained. "Remember him? He helped me and my dad when we bought the beach house. Very competent realtor." Lionel seemed speechless. "Why? Why didn't you consult me? Why didn't you consult me before you sold my property?" I asked back, and my voice was calmer than I expected. There was another pause. "Mom," Lionel finally said, his tone changing to the condescending one I hated so much. "I know you're upset, but I was only acting in your best interest. Now tell me, seriously, did you really sell the house and the car, or was it just, fantasy?" I felt anger rising inside me, but I forced myself to remain calm. "If you don't believe me, Lionel, call the registry office or the transit authority. They'll confirm that neither the cabin nor the car are registered in my name anymore." There was another pause, but this time I could hear Lionel breathing heavily. "Mom." His voice became strained. "If this is true, we have a serious problem. I've already gotten the money from the buyers, the full amount." "Then you do have a problem," I agreed. "Because you sold something that didn't belong to you, or to me." "I need to come over," he said suddenly. "We need to discuss this in person. I'll be there in an hour with Veronica." He hung up without waiting for my answer. I slowly put the phone down on the table, feeling a strange mix of emotions, anxiety, anger, but also some kind of perverse satisfaction. For the first time in a long time, Lionel was facing the consequences of his controlling behavior. I called Iris and briefly recounted the conversation with Lionel. "Oh my God, Mom!" She couldn't contain her laughter. "He really got himself into a mess, didn't he?" "I'm afraid so," I replied, feeling slightly guilty for finding the situation a little amusing. "He's on his way here with Veronica. He'll be here in an hour. Do you want me to come?" Iris asked. "For moral support?" I thought for a moment, but then shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "No, darling. I think I'm better off handling this on my own. But thank you for the offer." Exactly an hour later, when I had finished packing the last of the books, the doorbell rang. Lionel stood on the threshold, pale and tense, with Veronica behind him, her face a mixture of irritation and worry. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They walked into the living room and stopped, looking around at the half-empty room littered with boxes. What's going on in here? Lionel asked, his voice higher than usual. I'm moving, I answered simply. Have a seat if you can find one. I've already sold most of the furniture. They settled awkwardly on the couch, which I'd left behind because it didn't fit in with the decor of my new apartment. I sat down in the chair across from them and folded my hands in my lap, waiting to see what they had to say. Mom, Lionel began, clearly trying to be reasonable. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was just trying to help you. The beach house needed maintenance. The car was too big. I found great buyers, got a good price. All for your own good. For my own good? I said it again. Lionel, you sold my property without my knowledge or consent. How can it be for my own good? You're getting older, Mom. He grimaced slightly as he said it. It's hard for you to make good financial decisions. I just wanted to save you the stress of the process. Lionel. I leaned forward, looking him straight in the eye. I'm 67 years old. I don't suffer from dementia or any other condition that would affect my ability to make decisions. I am quite capable of managing my finances, as evidenced by the fact that I have successfully sold both the beach house, my car, this house, and bought a new apartment. All without your help. You sold the house? Veronica spoke for the first time, her eyes widening in surprise. Yes, I nodded. 3 weeks ago. The new owners move in 2 weeks. Where are you going to move to? Lionel asked, his voice shaking with barely contained anger. Brooklyn Heights. I couldn't help the slight smile as I watched his eyes widen in surprise. A lovely apartment on the 9th floor overlooking the park. The floor below Iris and Brad's apartment. Brooklyn Heights? Veronica seemed shocked. But it's one of the most expensive new developments in the city. Indeed, I agreed. But selling the 2 houses and the car had brought in a good amount of money, more than enough to buy an apartment without a mortgage and some other expenses. Lionel looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. His face changed from shock to disbelief, then to realization, and finally to something akin to panic. Mom. His voice became hoarse. Do you realize I already got the money for the beach house and the car? The full amount? The buyers expect me to hand over the paperwork to them in the next few days. Yes, that's a problem, I nodded. A problem you created yourself by selling something that doesn't belong to you. You have to help me, he suddenly exclaimed. This is your fault. My fault? I raised my eyebrows. How can selling my property be my fault? You should have told me. He was almost shouting now. You knew I was in the business of selling. No, I didn't, I replied calmly. You never mentioned it once in our conversations. You asked me if I was thinking of selling and I said I would think about it. That was all. Lionel, Veronica turned to her husband, her voice icy. You sold the property without the proper paperwork. I had a power of attorney. He defended himself. From our family lawyer, Mr. Burton. You mean a forged power of attorney? I clarified. Because I never signed a power of attorney in your name, Lionel. Never. My son's face turned ash gray. Burton said it was standard procedure that since you were a widow and I was your eldest son, I had the right to. You forged documents? Veronica jumped up from the couch, her eyes glittering with rage. Do you realize that's a felony, Lionel? Forgery? Fraud? Selling someone else's property? I didn't forge. Lionel stood up too, his face reddening. Burton said it was legal. Then Mr. Burton should refresh his knowledge of the law, I said. Because I'm pretty sure that a power of attorney requires my signature. Lionel paced the room, his hands in his hair. What am I going to do now? The money. I've already spent most of it. Spent it? Veronica seemed shocked. On what? On investments, he mumbled. And the car and the trip I wanted to give you for your anniversary. So, you spent money that wasn't yours on a gift for me? Veronica looked like she was ready to hit him. And now we could both be accomplices to fraud. I didn't know. Lionel raised his voice. How was I supposed to know she'd sell everything behind my back? Behind your back? I couldn't believe my ears. Lionel, it's my property. I don't have to answer to you about what I do with it. You're my mother. He turned to me, his face contorted with anger. Of course, you have to consult me, especially on such important decisions. No, I don't. I remained calm, which seemed to irritate him even more. I'm a capable adult. I make my own decisions. And where did that get you? He splayed his hands. You sold the family home. You bought a condo in this fancy complex that doesn't suit you at all. You're going to live next door to Iris, who can't even— Don't finish that sentence, Lionel. My voice became hard. Come on, tell me what you think of your sister. He paused, apparently realizing he'd gone too far. I just meant that you're used to a certain way of life, he said more softly. The house, the garden. You'll feel cramped in a small apartment. That's my concern, not yours, I replied. And in case you're wondering, I'm looking forward to moving in. No more worries about a leaky roof or broken plumbing. Everything is new, modern, comfortable. And yes, I'll be close to Iris, Brad, and Faye, who, unlike some, respect my right to make my own decisions. Lionel looked like he wanted to say something, but Veronica beat him to it. Let's get back to the main problem, she said, turning to my son. You took money for property you don't own. You have to give it back now. I told you I spent it. Lionel raised his voice. At least most of it. I don't have that kind of money. Then you'll have to borrow it, Veronica cut him off, because the alternative is prosecution for fraud. Borrow from who? Lionel looked cornered. The bank? With what kind of collateral? We're up to our necks in mortgages. It's not my problem. Veronica crossed her arms over her chest. You created this situation. You're the one who has to deal with it. Mom! Lionel turned to me, his tone suddenly changing to pleading. You have to help me. You don't want your son to end up in jail, do you? I stared at him, feeling a strange mixture of pity and disappointment. This grown man, my son, who always thought he knew best, now looked like a frightened child. Lionel, I said softly but firmly. I can't help you. The money from the sale had already been distributed. Some of it to buy an apartment, some to pay off Iris and Brad's mortgage, some for a new car that was more suited to the city. The rest I'm saving for the future. You gave the money to Iris? Lionel looked like he'd been punched. My sister, who works as a gardener and lives beyond her means in a luxury complex. Your sister, who has a loving husband with a good job, a beautiful daughter, and lives by her own values, not other people's expectations, I corrected. And yes, I helped them with their mortgage because I wanted to do it. It's not fair. Lionel was almost shouting. She was always your favorite. This isn't about favoritism, Lionel, I sighed. It's about respect. Iris respects my autonomy, my decisions. She offered me an option, but she left the decision up to me. She wasn't trying to control me or convince me that I wasn't capable of taking care of myself. I just wanted to help. His voice sounded almost pitiful. No, I shook my head. You wanted to control. That's different. Veronica, who'd been silently watching our exchange of remarks, suddenly turned to Lionel. I can't believe you put us in this position. Her voice was icy. You went behind your mother's back, probably broke the law, and now we could lose everything because of your incompetence. Don't you dare call me incompetent. Lionel turned sharply toward her. I was trying to keep us financially secure. I was thinking about our future. Provide security by deceiving your mother? Veronica grinned. That's a wonderful plan, Lionel. Just perfect. You never support me. Lionel raised his voice. Always criticizing, always finding faults. Because you're always making mistakes. Veronica started yelling too. First that bad investment last year. Now this. Do you realize we could lose the house if we have to pay that money back? I watched their argument with growing discomfort. It was an unpleasant sight to see two grown people yelling at each other, oblivious to my presence. And at the same time, there was some poetic justice in it. Lionel, who was so fond of controlling others, was now completely out of control of the situation. I think you'd better continue this conversation at home, I said, rising from my chair. I still have a lot to do in preparation for the move. They both turned to me as if they'd just been made aware of my presence. Lionel looked confused. Veronica looked angry. Yes, of course. Veronica was the first to come to her senses. I apologize for the scene, Rose. We really have to go. She headed for the door without waiting for her husband. Lionel lingered, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite pinpoint, a mixture of anger, resentment, and perhaps fear. Mom, he began, but I shook my head. Not now, Lionel. You need to deal with the problem you created, and maybe rethink some things. He stood for another moment as if he wanted to say something, but then he just nodded and followed his wife. The door closed behind them, and there was a blessed silence in the house. I returned to my chair and took a deep breath. Strangely, I felt no gloating or satisfaction that Lionel was in this situation, only fatigue and a slight sadness. After all, despite his flaws, he was my son. And it pained me to see how his own actions had led him to such a crisis. But at the same time, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the last threads that bound me to the past, to a life where I let others decide for me, had finally been severed. I was free, not only from extra stuff in a house that was too big, but also from expectations and control. In 2 weeks, I was moving into my new apartment in Brooklyn Heights. And despite the drama that had just played out in my living room, I was looking forward to this new beginning. Moving day was surprisingly sunny and warm for early fall. The movers had already loaded the last of the boxes into the van, and I took one last walk around the house I'd lived in for nearly 4 decades. The empty rooms echoed with my footsteps, and I felt a strange feeling, a mixture of nostalgia and relief. Goodbye, I whispered, standing in the doorway of the bedroom where Owen and I had spent so many nights. Thank you for everything. I didn't cry. All the tears had been cried before, in those first months after Owen's death, when every corner of the house reminded me of him. Now I was ready to move on, to start a new chapter. When I closed the front door behind me, Iris was already waiting for me by her car, ready to escort me to my new home. Are you okay, Mom? She asked, hugging me. More than okay, I smiled. Let's go. Brooklyn Heights welcomed us with activity, people strolling along the park's paths, sitting in sidewalk cafes, exercising on the sports fields. The place pulsed with life, and I felt a surge of energy just being here. My apartment on the 9th floor was exactly as I remembered it when I saw it, bright, spacious, and perfectly laid out. But now that my furniture and personal belongings had been moved in, it was truly mine. The panoramic windows filled the space with light, and the terrace had a wonderful view of the park. What do you think? Iris stood next to me, watching my reaction. It's perfect, I said. And it was the truth. The next few days passed in a flurry of settling and unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, hanging pictures. Iris, Brad, and even little Faye helped me, making the work a family activity. Grandma, look! Faye exclaimed, pulling an old picture of Owen out of a box. I found a picture of Grandpa. It will look good right here on the dresser. That's a great idea, sweetie. I kissed my granddaughter on the top of her head, touched by her concern. By the end of the week, the apartment was completely organized and looked as if I had always lived here. It was a strange but pleasant feeling to start fresh in a new place, while maintaining a connection to the past through carefully selected objects and photographs. Life in Brooklyn Heights was even better than I expected. The infrastructure of the complex was thoughtfully designed, from the 24-hour concierge service to the gym and pool. Within the first month, I discovered yoga for seniors, a book club, and weekly movie nights at the community center. You look happy, Mom, Iris remarked one evening as we sat on my patio enjoying tea in the sunset. I do feel happy, I admitted for the first time in a long time. And it was true. Every morning I woke up with a sense of anticipation. What would the day bring? Who would I meet? What new things will I learn? This energy and curiosity reminded me of my youth, of the time before marriage, when the whole world seemed full of possibilities. I became fast friends with several neighbors, especially Eleanor, a 70-year-old former literature teacher who lived next door. We often went to yoga together and then to coffee shops, discussing books, movies, and life in general. You know, Rose, she once told me, at our age, starting something new is an act of courage. Most people just cling to the old and familiar, even if it makes them unhappy. Her words made me think of Lionel. After that memorable day when he found out about my move, we hardly spoke to each other. He called a few times, but the conversations were tense and short. I knew from Iris that he was facing serious financial problems due to the need to pay back the defrauded buyers. He had taken out a loan against the house, my daughter told me, and he and Veronica seemed to be fighting about it all the time. She accuses him of incompetence. He snaps back. It's not a very pleasant situation. I felt regret, but not guilt. Lionel had created this problem by his own actions, by his desire to control my life. And while it pained me to see my son suffer, I realized I couldn't save him from the consequences of his own decisions. My life, meanwhile, was taking on a new rhythm and meaning. I began volunteering at the local library twice a week, helping with the children's reading program. It reminded me of the times when Iris and Lionel were little, and I would read to them before bedtime. I also enrolled in a watercolor painting class, a hobby I had always dreamed of but never found the time for. It was a special joy to spend time with Faye. Now that I lived so close, she would often drop by after school, and we would spend time together until Iris and Brad got home from work. We'd bake cookies, play board games, sometimes just sit on the patio watching the birds and squirrels in the park. Grandma, I'm so glad you live close by now, Faye said to me one day when we were making Thanksgiving cards. I used to see you only on weekends, but now I see you every day. Her words warmed my heart. I too was grateful for this opportunity to be a real part of my granddaughter's life, to see her grow and develop, to participate in her daily joys and anxieties. One day, about 3 months after I moved in, I was returning from morning yoga when Michael, the concierge, stopped me in the lobby. Mrs. Holloway, you have a visitor, he informed me with slight awkwardness. Your son. He's been waiting for about half an hour, but I didn't want to disturb you during class. I was surprised. Lionel had never come to Brooklyn Heights before, much less unannounced. Thank you, Michael. Where is he? In the lobby bar. The concierge pointed to the glass doors at the end of the lobby. I told him I couldn't let him upstairs without your permission, as you requested for all visitors. I nodded, grateful for the strict adherence to security rules. One of the perks of living in Brooklyn Heights was just that, no one could just go upstairs to the living area without the tenant's approval. Lionel sat at the bar, sipping his coffee and nervously checking his cell phone. He didn't look good, pale, gaunt, with circles under his eyes. When he saw me, he stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his cup. Mom, finally, he said with relief. I thought you were avoiding me. I was at yoga, I explained, sitting down at a table away from the other customers. You could have called before you came over. Lionel sat down across from me, his gaze roving restlessly over the stylish interior of the lobby bar. It's a beautiful place, he said finally. Impressive. Yeah, I like it here, I nodded. What brings you here, Lionel? He hesitated, then blurted out. Mom, I need your help. I waited for him to continue, though I already knew what he was talking about. The situation is complicated, he said, avoiding my eyes. The loan I took out to pay back the buyers, the interest rate was higher than I bargained for. And Veronica, she left me. She filed for divorce. I felt a pang of regret. Despite our differences, Lionel was still my son, and it pained me to see him suffer. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. Yes, he grinned bitterly. She said she could no longer live with a man who was not only incompetent financially, but also so arrogant that he refused to admit it. He was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Mom, I know you have money left over from selling the houses. I need a loan to refinance the loan. I'll pay it back with interest as soon as I stabilize the situation. I looked at my son for a long time. Sitting in front of me was the man who always thought he knew best how to live my life, how to manage my money, how to make decisions. A man who had tried to control my life under the pretense of caring. And now he was in a situation he couldn't control. Lionel, I said softly but firmly, I can't give you that money. Why not? His face contorted with resentment. You helped Iris with the mortgage. Why can she and I can't? It's not a matter of can or can't, I explained. The point is, you don't need financial help. You need to learn to live within your means, accept the consequences of your decisions, and most importantly, stop trying to control things that don't belong to you. But I could lose the house. He sounded desperate. Maybe, I nodded. And it would be hard. But Lionel, money isn't the solution to your problem. Your problem is much deeper than that. And the only person who can solve it is you. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite define, shock, disbelief, maybe even a glimmer of realization. I am your son, he said at last. Shouldn't you be helping me? I am helping you, I answered. By not letting you escape the consequences of your actions. Sometimes the greatest help is to let a man find his own way out of a situation he's created. Lionel sat in silence, staring into his nearly empty cup. Then he stood up, pulled on his jacket. I understand, he said dryly. I'm sorry to bother you. Lionel. I stood up too. You will always be my son, and I will always love you. But I will no longer indulge your desire to control everything around you, including me. When you're ready for a relationship based on mutual respect, I'll be happy to see you. He nodded without looking at me and headed for the exit. He stopped at the door as if he wanted to say something, but then he just walked out. I went back to my apartment, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and calm. Talking to Lionel was hard, but necessary, and perhaps in the long run, it was the best thing I could do for him, give him a chance to grow up by facing the consequences of his actions. That evening, Iris, Brad, Faye, and I had dinner together, as we did almost every night. After dinner, when Faye went to her room to do her homework, I told them about Lionel's visit. He's really in a bad situation, Iris sighed. But you did the right thing, Mom. Lionel needs to learn to take responsibility for his actions. I know, I nodded. But that doesn't make the decision any less painful. Brad, who had been silently listening to our conversation, suddenly got up and left the room. He came back with a bottle of wine and 3 glasses. I think we could all use some, he said with a slight smile as he poured the wine. We sat in cozy silence, sipping the wine and looking at the lights of the city outside the window. It was at times like this that I realized how lucky I was to be with Iris and Brad, with their love and support. By the way, Brad said suddenly, as if remembering something. I've been meaning to tell you for a long time, Rose. Do you remember when Iris and I offered you an apartment in our complex? Sure, I nodded. It was the best offer I'd gotten in a long time. Well, actually, he looked a little embarrassed. I asked a colleague of mine, Neil, to hold the apartment for you. He works in the sales department of Brooklyn Heights. Really? I looked at him in surprise. Yes. Brad nodded. When we heard that the 9th floor apartment was vacant, Iris and I thought of you. And to be honest, he looked at Iris as if asking permission to continue. She nodded, smiling. If you didn't have enough money from the house sale, we were planning to take out an additional mortgage and buy this apartment for you. Brad finished. We just wanted you to be there for us. I felt a lump rise in my throat and tears fill my eyes. These two, my daughter and her husband, were willing to take on an extra financial burden just so I could be closer to them. Not because they thought I was incapable of taking care of myself, but simply out of love and a desire to be together. I don't know what to say, I mumbled, wiping away my tears. It's the most touching thing anyone has ever done for me. We love you, Mom, Iris said, simply squeezing my hand. And we want you to be a part of our daily lives, not just a weekend visitor. I hugged them both, feeling gratitude and love overwhelm me. In that moment, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I had made the right choice. Not only in moving to Brooklyn Heights, but in the way I had lived my life, raising children who had grown up so different. Lionel, with all his flaws, was a product of his choices, to seek control, to seek material success, to seek power. Iris had chosen a different path, the path of love, of caring, of genuine relationships. And now, sitting in the warm living room surrounded by the love of my family, I was deeply grateful that I had made my choice. The choice to be with those who truly valued me for who I was. It was dusk outside the window, but there was light in my heart. The light of the new life I had chosen for myself.